That night, the silence in the hallway of Oakwood Nursing Home felt different. Everyone was asleep. The streets outside were empty. The city held itself still, like a long breath it hadn't let go of. But Emily Carter was not asleep. Emily Carter never slept during her shift. She moved down the corridor in quiet steps, making small marks in her notepad, pausing outside each room. She listened, labored breathing, the occasional moan, wind pressing through a cracked seal, and sometimes, very rarely, someone calling out a name that belonged to a person who had been gone for years. Emily Carter was 33 years old, 4 years at Oakwood Nursing Home. The pay was barely above minimum wage. The recognition was non-existent. She wasn't here for either of those things. She was here because her mother had Parkinson's, early stage, but she knew how quickly early stage could fall behind. She was learning, night by night, how to love someone through the hardest part of their life, by doing it right now for someone else's mother. At 1:45 in the morning, she returned to the nurse's station and opened the handover logbook. At the bottom of the page, a note: new patient transfer expected, room 14. Dorothy Chambers, age 87, arriving by private transport. Note: visitor list is restricted. Restricted. Emily read that word twice. No explanation, no reason given. Just that single word sitting at the end of the sentence like a door that had been deliberately locked. She looked toward the window. And at that exact moment, a pair of headlights swept across the parking lot. The car was black, expensive, a luxury sedan with tinted windows that were nearly opaque. It moved slowly over the gravel, almost without sound. That was how new it was, how costly. The engine barely whispered. Emily walked to the entrance. Protocol required it. She held the door. The first man out of the vehicle had already taken ownership of the entire space before she had fully seen him. That was how it felt. Before she could register his face, he had already positioned himself at the center of things. Mid-50s, silver-black hair, not a strand out of place. A navy suit without a single crease despite what must have been hours on the road. His chin was slightly raised. His steps were measured and unhurried. A man who was not calm because nothing had ever gone wrong, but because he had made sure nothing ever would. "Good evening," Emily said. "Welcome to Oakwood. I'm Emily Carter, night shift." "I know," the man said. His tone was polite, but it left no room for conversation. "Richard Chambers, Dorothy Chambers' son. I spoke with your administrator. Paperwork is done." "Yes, the file is ready." "Good." He turned to the driver. "Bring her out." And the wheelchair came through the door. Emily saw Dorothy Chambers for the first time in that moment. Something moved through her that was difficult to name. Not pity. She had moved past pity in this work long ago. Not quite empathy either. Something closer to recognition. As if she had seen this woman before. As if she already knew that particular look. Because Dorothy Chambers' eyes were open. And in them, in those tired, aged eyes, was something Emily had not seen in hundreds of patients before. Fear. Pure, silenced, deeply buried fear. As the wheelchair moved past Emily through the entrance, Dorothy's eyes turned toward her. Just for a moment. Less than a second. And in that fraction of time, Emily saw something inside them. that no medical file had prepared her for. A plea, not spoken, not in words, but it was there. Emily let the door close and turned to face Richard Chambers. He handed her the intake forms. She walked him through the protocols: medication schedule, daily routines, shift handovers. He listened while his eyes moved around the corridor. Then he turned back to her, and his voice changed. Not louder, not harsher, but something underneath it tightened. My mother has dementia, advanced stage. It's all in the file. Whatever she says, even on days when she seems coherent, please don't take it seriously. She confuses people. She confuses time. She sounds convincing sometimes, but the diagnosis speaks for itself. He paused. Visitor list is myself and my assistant only. Anyone else, former neighbors, colleagues, friends, turn them away. Politely, but firmly. Emily kept her voice level. Understood. He stepped closer. His voice dropped to something just above a whisper. In this kind of work, emotional attachment is natural. I understand that. But what's best for my mother is calm, routine, no unnecessary stimulation. So please don't draw her into conversation. Don't ask her questions. Let her rest. And he left. Emily stood in the corridor and listened to his footsteps fade. Then she walked to room 14, knocked softly, opened the door. Dorothy had been settled into the bed. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling, breathing steady. Everything appeared exactly as it should, but her eyes were still open. And when Emily stepped closer, those eyes moved, slowly, deliberately, toward her. The fear was still there, but beneath it, very deep, was something else. Hope. The next 3 days shook Emily to her foundation, but no one noticed. From the outside, everything was routine. Emily did her job: medication checks, vital signs, meal assistance, hygiene routines. Dorothy was quiet, no responses to questions, lips occasionally moving but no coherent sound. When the day staff checked in, when the facility doctor made his rounds, Dorothy was exactly what her file described. Blank gaze, no reactions, murmuring occasionally into silence. A textbook Alzheimer's patient. But Emily worked the night shift, and in the deep of the night, after 1 in the morning, when the last footsteps faded from the corridor and the facility held its breath, Dorothy's eyes changed. Emily first noticed it on the 2nd night. By the 3rd night, she was certain. During the day, Dorothy was unreachable, slow, hollow, somewhere else entirely. But after midnight, something happened behind those eyes. A deliberate shift. A light that came back. The measured gaze of someone who knew exactly where they were, who knew someone else was in the room, who was waiting and watching and assessing every detail. This was not dementia. This was a person, trapped behind a performance, made invisible by a diagnosis, but still entirely, completely, terrifyingly there. On the 4th night, at 3:20 in the morning, Emily entered room 14 for a medication check. The bedside lamp cast a pale amber light across the room. Emily set the tray on the table, and Dorothy reached for her. A thin hand, veins visible beneath pale, spotted skin. But the grip was strong, stronger than it had any right to be. It closed around Emily's wrist. Emily went still. Dorothy's lips moved, Nothing came at first, then, "Help me." Emily knelt beside the bed. She brought her face level with Dorothy's. "Mrs. Chambers, can you hear me?" "I hear you." Voice trembling, but clear, precise. "Are you really listening to me?" "Yes, every word." Dorothy's eyes filled. She took a breath. Careful, controlled, as if she had been saving this moment and couldn't afford to waste it. "I am not sick," she said. "I have been in prison." Emily stayed until 4 in the morning. Dorothy spoke slowly, pausing often, but she spoke, and Emily listened to every word. Dorothy Walsh had been born in Boston in 1937. She grew up without a father during the years her mother cleaned other people's houses. She attended university on scholarship, literature. Then she worked at a library, and that was where she met James. Dr. James Chambers, young medical researcher, Harvard doctorate, freshly completed, wanted to be a cardiologist. They had met when Dorothy's stack of books collapsed, and they both bent to pick them up and stood at the same moment and knocked their heads together. They had been married for 35 years. Dr. James Chambers had been, at the height of his career, a genuinely historic figure in cardiology. He developed a biomarker protocol capable of detecting the signs of a heart attack hours before any visible symptoms appeared. It entered medical literature as the Chambers Protocol. It saved lives that no one even knew were at risk. And 5 years ago, at 82 years old, he had died of a heart attack at home. Dorothy had never believed it. James was healthy, she said. His checkup 6 months before was perfect. His doctor was astonished. He looked me in the eye and told me, "Your husband will live to be 100. 6 months later, James was gone. What happened in those 6 months? Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Richard came. Richard Chambers was James's son from his first marriage. Brief, ended early, a part of James's history he carried with quiet guilt. Richard had grown up with his mother. He and James had never been close. Annual visits at best, formal and cool, until James retired. After James retired, Richard started coming regularly, being attentive, helpful. He wanted to organize James's research archives. "Let me help you, Dad," he said. And James let him. Because James wanted a son in his final chapter. 3 months after James' death, Dorothy went to the estate attorney. The will had been changed in James's final year. The Research Foundation inheritance, the legacy James had spent his life building, had been transferred to Richard under a management rights provision, supported by a psychiatric evaluation that documented concerns about James's cognitive condition, an evaluation James had never known about, and the psychiatrist who had signed it was Richard's college roommate. That morning, Emily did not go home. She went to the public library. She used a public computer terminal. She didn't want any search traced back to her phone, back to the facility, back to anything Richard could find if he was looking. She typed Dorothy Chambers into the search bar. There was almost nothing. For a woman married 35 years to one of the most cited cardiologists in American medical history, Dorothy Chambers had been almost completely erased from the public record. No interviews, no photographs beyond a handful from decades ago. No mentions in the tributes written after James's death, as if she had been quietly edited out of the story. Emily went deeper. Regional newspapers, news archives going back years. And there it was. Boston Herald 2.5 years ago. Widow of renowned cardiologist demands investigation. alleges irregularities in death. Emily stopped breathing. She read every word. Dorothy had hired a private investigator after James's death. The investigation had surfaced troubling patterns. James's medication routine appeared to have been altered in his final months. A home nurse had been abruptly dismissed and had since gone silent. The psychiatric evaluation that supported the will change had been conducted without any family notification and had never appeared in James's own medical records. Dorothy had taken everything to the district attorney. The DA had reviewed the file. Insufficient evidence. Case closed. Emily looked at the date the article was published. Then she looked at the date Dorothy Chambers had received her Alzheimer's diagnosis. 9 weeks. Between the article running in the paper and Dorothy receiving that diagnosis, 9 weeks. The most effective way to silence a person who is telling the truth. Give them a label that makes everything they say sound like a symptom. Emily sat back from the screen. The library around her continued in its ordinary morning rhythm. People returning books. A child asking a question. Someone printing something at the counter. All of it completely unaware. She returned to Oakwood that night and waited for the building to go quiet. At 20 to 2 in the morning, she entered room 14. Dorothy was waiting for her. Eyes already open, already alert. "They took everything," Dorothy said. "The detective's report, my notes, the photographs I took of James' medication bottles in those last months. Before I was moved out of the house, Richard organized everything. He said he was doing it for my safety, but what he was really doing, he destroyed it. He tried to." A pause. Then, carefully, "But years ago, before any of this happened, I wrote a letter to James's cardiologist, his longtime colleague, Dr. Sarah Goodman. I wrote it when I first began to worry, when Richard first started coming around, when things started feeling wrong in ways I couldn't yet name. I put everything in that letter, every suspicion I had, every date I had noticed, every name. I sealed it, and I sent it to her, and I said, if something ever happens, if the right person ever comes asking, give them this." Emily leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is that letter still out there?" Sarah retired, but she kept it. She promised me. "What's her full name?" Dorothy looked at her, steady, certain. "Dr. Sarah Goodman, Boston. She was in cardiology for 30 years. She'll remember." Emily opened her notepad. Her hands were shaking, but her writing was clear. Dr. Sarah Goodman, Boston. And at that exact moment, the door of room 14 opened. Emily was on her feet in one motion. Richard Chambers stood in the doorway. 1:45 in the morning. Inside the facility. At a time when no visitor should exist anywhere in the building. No suit tonight. Dark sweater, dark trousers. But his hair was still perfect. And his eyes. Those eyes were different now from the daytime version of him. The measured politeness was gone. What was left was something that moved quickly, that calculated, that took in Emily and the notepad and Dorothy and the space between them in the span of a single second. He looked at Emily's face, then at the notepad in her hand, then at Dorothy, then back at Emily. "Did someone call you in here?" he said. His voice was low. "Routine check." hourly protocol on night shift. At this hour. Yes. At this hour. Every hour. Richard walked into the room, slowly, with deliberate, unhurried steps. He closed the door behind him. "Were you talking with my mother?" "She made a sound when I came in. I checked on her." "What did she say?" "Nothing coherent. She vocalizes sometimes." He stopped. He looked at Emily for a long moment, not blinking, not shifting. The kind of look that was meant to find something, to locate whatever you were hiding and name it out loud. Then he smiled, very slowly. "You're very dedicated," he said. 4 years here, isn't it?" "Yes. Good position, stable, reliable. You wouldn't want to lose that." Emily said nothing. In the bed, Dorothy lay completely still, but her eyes were open, and she was watching every single thing that was happening between them. Richard turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, he stopped. He looked back over his shoulder. "My mother constructs very vivid stories," he said. His voice was almost gentle, explaining something to a child. "It's a feature of the condition. She sounds completely convincing sometimes. But the diagnosis is documented by 3 independent physicians." He paused. "You don't have to take any of it seriously." And he was gone. His footsteps moved down the corridor and faded. Emily stood completely still for 15 seconds. Then, slowly, without taking her eyes off the door, she reached into the pocket of her scrubs. She took out her phone. She looked at the screen. The voice recorder had been running since 1:38. It was now 2:11. 33 minutes. Every word Dorothy had said, every word Richard had said, all of it captured. Emily took one slow breath. Then she turned back to Dorothy. The old woman looked at her from the bed. In her eyes was a question she was afraid to ask out loud. "I'm not leaving," said Emily, quietly, absolutely. Dorothy's eyes filled. Tears moved down the lines of her face. "Everyone said that," she whispered, "and everyone left." Emily didn't answer with words. She reached out and placed her hand over Dorothy's, and she stayed. When she walked out at 6 in the morning, the sky was just beginning to lighten at the edges. Emily stood in the parking lot for a moment. Then she took out her phone. Boston area code. Goodman. Sarah Goodman, retired cardiologist. 3 results. The first 2 were wrong. The third one answered. "Hello?" An older woman's voice, clear and direct. "Dr. Goodman? Dr. Sarah Goodman?" "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Emily Carter. I'm a nursing assistant at Oakwood Nursing Home in Massachusetts. Dorothy Chambers is a patient here. She told me about a letter she sent you years ago." "How did you find out she was there?" Emily felt something loosen inside her chest. "She told me herself." A long silence. "Is she alive?" "Yes. And she's not well, but not in the way you might think." "Give me your address," said Dr. Goodman. The next 48 hours were the most intense of Emily Carter's life. Dr. Sarah Goodman had kept the letter. Through 30 years of accumulated files moved from office to home to storage and back again, through retirements and relocations and the ordinary accumulation of a long life, she had kept it in a manila folder. Inside a sealed envelope, written on the outside in Dorothy's handwriting, "Open if something happens." Dr. Goodman had never opened it. She had kept it as a promise. She had kept it because she had known James Chambers for decades, and she had known that Dorothy Walsh was not a woman who made requests without reason. After Emily's call, Dr. Goodman did not wait. She called her attorney that same afternoon, and the attorney, with the contents of that envelope spread across his desk, filed with the federal prosecutor's office before the end of the business day. The letter contained everything: the name of the home nurse who had managed James's medications and the precise date she was dismissed, a date that matched the period when James' behavior had first begun to seem changed. Dorothy's own handwritten logs of Richard's visits to the family home during James's final year, dates, durations, which rooms he had accessed. James's own notes from that period written in his meticulous hand, describing a heaviness and a confusion he could not account for that had seemed to come from nowhere. And the name, the full name and credentials of the psychiatrist who had arrived at the house the same afternoon the new will was signed. That psychiatrist and Richard Chambers had been roommates at law school. When the investigation formally opened, investigators located the dismissed home nurse within 48 hours. She had said nothing for years, because she was afraid. But when investigators arrived at her door and showed her what was in the letter, she agreed to testify. All of it. Everything she had seen and been told to forget. The security footage from Oakwood Nursing Home was pulled and reviewed. Richard Chambers arriving at 1:38 in the morning, leaving at 2:14, no appointment logged, no visitor sign-in completed, no protocol followed. A detail that meant little in isolation, a detail that meant everything as part of a pattern. Emily's voice recording was handed over to the attorneys. Specialists listened, transcribed, assessed. "You wouldn't want to lose that," said softly, with plausible deniability built into every syllable, carefully constructed to sound like concern rather than threat. But placed inside 33 minutes of recorded conversation, following everything Dorothy had said, it sounded like exactly what it was. An independent neurologist was brought in to examine Dorothy. The conclusion was delivered in a single paragraph of clinical language that, stripped to its core, said this: Dorothy Chambers was not an advanced stage Alzheimer's patient. There was mild age-related cognitive slowing, within entirely normal parameters for a woman her age. Advanced dementia, no clinical evidence of any kind. The diagnosis was not the result of medical judgment. It was a tool. The physician who had signed the original diagnosis was brought into the scope of the investigation within the week. Emily did not learn about Richard Chambers' arrest from a news alert or a headline. She learned about it from her supervisor, who was waiting in the corridor when she finished her shift on a Tuesday morning, who asked her to step into the office, who told her that Richard's attorney had filed a complaint, unauthorized recording, patient privacy violation, and then sat across the desk from her waiting for a reaction. Emily sat down. The recording was made with Dorothy's knowledge and consent in the moment she asked for help. I can document that in any court, in any format requested. Her supervisor was quiet. I also understand, said Emily, that the facility's administrative connections are being reviewed as part of the broader investigation. More quiet. I didn't do anything wrong, Emily said. Her voice was even and unhurried. I protected a patient. That is what this job means. She stood up and walked out. 9 weeks after Dorothy Chambers had arrived at Oakwood in the back of a black car with fear in her eyes and no one to call, a different car pulled into the parking lot. An ordinary car. A family member's car. Dorothy's niece, A real niece, a real family connection that Richard had quietly kept at a distance for years, who had emerged the moment the investigation began and had not left Dorothy's side since. Emily arrived that morning without being scheduled, without a reason anyone could log in a book. She arrived because she wanted to be there. Dorothy rose from the wheelchair without help. Emily stepped forward and Dorothy raised one hand. No, not necessary. And she stood on her own 2 feet, thin, slow, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone who has learned not to trust the ground beneath them, but upright. She walked down the corridor under her own power, and Emily walked beside her, and neither of them spoke until they reached the door. At the exit, Dorothy stopped. She took both of Emily's hands in hers. She looked at her for a long moment. "What can I possibly say to you?" she whispered. "Nothing," said Emily. "You don't have to say a word." Dorothy's eyes filled. She kept going anyway. "James always told me something." She paused. The grief moved across her face and she let it. "He said good people are rare, but they exist. And one day, just one day, they change everything." Emily felt the heat rise behind her eyes. She kept them clear. Dorothy stepped through the door and into the pale April sunlight. The car door opened. She got in. The car pulled slowly away and the red tail lights moved down the street and around the corner and were gone. Emily stood at the entrance for a long moment. Then she turned around. She walked back down the corridor, back to the nurses' station. She picked up her notepad. She looked at the shift list. Room 15, new resident, 82 years old, suspected cognitive decline, family situation complicated, staff note, difficult to reach. Emily closed the notepad. She walked to the door of room 15. She knocked, softly. "Good morning," came a voice from inside. Broken, uncertain, but present. Emily opened the door. "Good morning, I'm Emily. I'll be looking after you today." The man inside raised his head. His eyes were exhausted from something she didn't know yet, but he managed a small, uncertain smile. Emily walked in. Because the work was never finished. It never was. And she was here,